Puff father told on their operation. New York Freddie told the guy who brought Puff father into his crew, you gotta handle it. I want it handled. So then he said, I want it handled. So now the dude handled the situation. Puff father was driving the cab. He met him on Central Park West and did what he did. And so I said to New York Freddie, I said, yeah? He said, and the guy who killed him was carrying the casket, crying the hardest at the funeral. I was like, oh, shit. Now, check this out. I was going to tell this story on my members only page on my YouTube channel, The Gene Deal Show. Only my members, hey, but I'm going to give it to you. It's this lady that told me she was dating Puff father at the time. Right? She was dating Puff father at the time. She said she was waiting on him because they were supposed to be going out to Smalls Paul. It was either Small Paul, she said, or it was this place up there on McCoon's Bridge. I got it because she texted this whole thing to me, bro. It's crazy how she texted me this whole story. She said that she never knew why Puff father was killed. He said the word got through Harlem that he was murdered. You understand? And she went up to the bar the next day, and the same dudes was on his team that he worked with him, sold drugs with him. New York Freddie and their whole crew. He said they was in the bar laughing and talking like nothing had ever happened. She said, thank you, Gene, for telling me that story about New York Freddie and Diddy father, because now I know what happened to him. So Melvin Combs was a rat. And these guys, this came from a gangster himself, you understand, who said he had police on the payroll. He told the guy who brought Diddy father in, you got to get rid of him.
Melvin Combs gave Harlem hope, but he was murdered in cold blood as he sat in his car.
This is coming from New York Freddie's mouth to me. He was the boss. You understand? He told the guy he had to get rid of him. He said, you know what? The guy who was carrying the casket, crying the hardest, is the one who killed him.
In the storm of recent headlines surrounding one of music's most influential figures, Sean Diddy Combs, lies a largely untold narrative. It's a story rooted decades in the past, one that undeniably shaped the man who would become a billionaire mogul, yet remains cloaked in the shadows of a criminal underworld.
The question is, how did they know exactly where he would be?
Today, we look into the dark story of the life and tragic demise of Melvin Combs, Diddy's father, a figure whose destiny was linked to the dangerous streets of Harlem and notorious drug lords who ran them.
His father was a well-known, well-liked hustler, and I know this because the same people that started him and knew him and raised him in the thing, those were, because they're mostly dead, not all of them, but most of them. They're the ones that brought Melvin in and put him on and gave him, put him in a position to, make his money or whatever have you. And and I have conversations with me and those people that no one's ever heard. Right. I knew that, they're old, they're going to be gone soon. So I had conversations with them. And in some of those conversations, we talked about Melvin and exactly verbatim what happened to him. Right. And how and why it happened, but he was a provider, and he provided, and Puff didn't grow up in abject poverty like a lot of the people who related to him when he first got heavy in the scene, whatever. And that's why he was their hero. He was a representation of every fantasy they could think of. And it wasn't like he was actually at that point, but he was saying he was, which gave them hope.
Born Melvin Earl Combs on April 15th, 1938, in Harlem, New York, to Isaac Combs Jr. and Helen Combs, Melvin was by all accounts a well-educated individual. He sought a different path than the one offered by his neighborhood, choosing to enlist in the United States Air Force. This decision signaled a desire for structure and a world beyond the familiar confines of Harlem. However, the landscape he returned to after the Vietnam War's end in 1973 was starkly different from the one he left. Soldiers often found themselves without parades or jobs, and many, including Melvin, were forced to navigate a society grappling with racial inequality and limited opportunities. For Melvin, the streets of Harlem offered a quick, easy fix, a plunge into the heroin trade that had consumed the city. Melvin quickly established himself as a hustler and drug dealer. What began as a small-time operation soon caught the attention of New York's most formidable crime figures. He forged dangerous associations, becoming an associate and lieutenant within the organization of Frank Lucas, the infamous drug kingpin who would later inspire the film American Gangster.
You ain't see the job, Frank? I think you wore right past it. The money job, Frank. What I got to do, put a fucking sign on it? Bumpy don't own no real estate in Harlem right now. I'm the landlord and the lease is 20%. But look, don't sell dope then, Frank. Get a real job. You need a fucking job, Frank? That what you need? Well, you can come work for me. You can drive me around. Huh? You can open my doors.
20%. 20% is my profit, Tango. I give you that. What do I got left? Nothing, right? 20% puts me out of business and every somebody you know out of business. There's legitimate ways of doing things, Tango, and then there's this way. Not even Bumpy took 20%.
Bumpy's fucking dead.
My man. 20%. Doc, let's go.
Lucas, known for circumventing traditional mafia channels, directly sourced heroin from the Golden Triangle in Southeast Asia, smuggling it into the U.S. in the coffins of fallen GIs. Melvin and Lucas were good friends, conducting significant, albeit illegal, business together, with Melvin often frequenting Lucas's club, the Turntable. But Melvin's reach in the underworld extended even further. He also caught the eye of Nicky Barnes, who in the early 1970s was rising as the country's #1 heroin dealer, raking in millions. Barnes, a former heroin addict who had learned discipline from mobsters like Joey Gallo and Matty Madonna during prison stints, assembled a powerful group of 7 top drug dealers known as the Council. This council, which included Frank Lucas, pledged loyalty and operated much like the mafia, carving up Harlem and parts of Brooklyn into lucrative territories. Despite his deep entanglement in this world, Melvin Combs was also a dedicated family man. He was married to Janice Combs, a model and teacher assistant, and together they had 2 young children, an older daughter and a younger son, Sean Combs, who would later be known as Diddy. However, their happiness was tragically short-lived. It's alleged that Nicky Barnes himself may have ordered the hit because he believed Melvin was a snitch. Adding a layer of complexity to this tragedy, rumors from Frank Lucas's camp suggest that a family member of Diddy inadvertently provided the trigger man with Melvin's location, but they allegedly believed they only intended to rough him up.
Frank Lucas turned informant against police officers. You understand? He turned informant against police officers that were working for him. Diddy's father was killed because he tried to rat out the people that he was working for.
For years, Diddy's mom shielded her son from the brutal truth, telling Diddy his father had died in a car accident. It wasn't until Diddy was at Howard University that he uncovered the full story. Researching his father's name in library, he found accounts of his murder in a drug deal gone bad. Despite the shocking revelation, Diddy expressed no ill will toward his father, understanding that drug dealing was often seen as one of the few avenues out of Harlem.
I was raised by a single mother in Harlem. My dad, Mr. Melvin Combs, died when I was 3 years old. My mother always told me that he died in a car accident. But something about that, it just didn't feel right. Something was in my soul that was telling me otherwise. So as soon as I got here, I went to the library and I did some research. I used the microfilm at Founders to search through all the newspapers. And when I typed in my father's name and the day he died, I read in the Amsterdam News that he had been murdered in a drug deal going bad. Right there in that library, I realized there's nothing greater than a mother's love and desire to protect her child. Nothing. I also decided that I would live my life in a way to make her proud. I decided to embrace the entrepreneurial spirit of my father, but in an honest way.
Diddy often spoke of embracing his father's entrepreneurial spirit in an honest way. However, many suggest a different influence. They claim that Diddy's blueprint for building Bad Boy Records bore a striking resemblance to Nicky Barnes's mob-like empire, rather than solely his father's.
Do you think this alias Frank Black and Frank White, do you think that Diddy is trying to be the new millennial Frank Lucas?
No, not at all. No. What happened is that Big used to use Frank White. You remember that thing called New York, Kings of New York, Chevron TV, Skrilla, Kings of New York. Yeah.
Oh, that ugly
King of New York, King of Christopher Walken, Philly Raptor, Trick Walken, Kid Rock. Yeah. He played it. That was his name, Frank White. Big used to say his name was Frank White and everything like that. I don't know where Puff got the Frank Black shit from, but Big used to say he was Frank White, and Puff used to say back in the day when I was working for him, he was Barry Gordy.
Bad Boy Entertainment. I named it Bad Boy because I wanted to go against the grain. Anytime you go against the grain, they consider you like kind of bad. Nothing negative, nothing like hardcore. Just, I didn't want to be regular. I didn't want to just make records. I didn't want to just make money. I wanted to make history. And that's all it's ever been about for me, making history. And making music that's timeless. Music that's going to be around when I'm not here, when my kids ain't here. Music that is that good. And having artists and videos and things that, really affect way of life in a positive way. Affect style, fashion, music. Bad Boy.
Frank Lucas himself alluded to not sharing the whole story of Melvin with Diddy, suggesting Diddy didn't press him for the complete truth.
I met him when I was a little boy. He used to come over to my house. His daddy used to bring him over my house. He used to come see me on various businesses, and he used to bring him over my house from time to time. But I met Sean about a year ago. It's been a little better than a year ago. He heard I know the father, and he wanted me to tell him about the father. So I come over there, and I told him something about the father, but I didn't give him the whole story because he didn't press me. He just asked me casual, and I told him casual. But if he pressed me, I would have told him the whole story.
About his dad?
Yeah. Well, all I know, but I didn't do that because he didn't press it. If he act like he really wanted to know, he act like it was just another thing, so I had to go.
Right, and you knew him as Sean Combs, not as Puffy or P. Diddy, right?
No, I know him as Melvin's son. I didn't know his name.
Okay, so also it said that he was mistaken as an informant.
It wasn't
true.
That's not true. It wasn't no mistaken shit. That's somebody that's trying to sell a story and say some other shit. New York Freddie. I was brought to him by Omar. Omar was one of his lieutenants. If you see Omar ran 114th Street, between 7th and 8th. Omar was one of our OGs whenever we gave block parties, boat rides, and everything like that, and we were short money or we need extra money, Omar would give us money towards that. He loved the way I cooked. He loved the way, we used to give block parties, give parties, stuff like that. He used to always come get a plate. You understand what I'm saying? So then he used to look out for us. So now Omar, when New York Freddie came home, Omar brought me to him because I was still dealing with Puff, and this was about 2003, 2004, something like that. And so then he said, I tried to talk to Puff. I called Russell Simmons. Russell Simmons wouldn't even answer my phone call, or he wouldn't get back in touch with me. And this motherfucker used to go get my cleaners for me because he the one started that record label shit, and Russell Simmons took it to another level. He had his first record label, that was New York Freddie. He said, I had a glass table with $1 million, like covered in it. He had $100 bills, stacks of $100 bills and $10,000, all in this glass table. Where if you break the table, you could take a stacks of 10,000 out. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Right. He said that was in my office. He said Russell Simmons used to go get my laundry for me from the cleaners.
Wow.
You understand? He said, Diddy's father got caught, and he may have been set up by one of the people on the team and whatever, because Diddy's father really was a ladies' man. You know what I'm saying? This was New York Freddie was telling me. He was really a lady more. He was more like not a pimp, but a player. You understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
He had a lot of ladies and everything like that. He said that he was trying to get into the dope game, the drug game and stuff like that. He got caught by one of their cops that was working for them. He gave them $10,000, the cop. The cop brought them the written statement that Diddy father made and the recording. He told the guy who brought Diddy father in, you got to get rid of him. This is coming from New York Freddie's mouth to me.
Right, from somebody that was like,
that he was the boss out there. He was the boss. You understand? He told the guy he had to get rid of him, and he said, you know what? The guy who was carrying the casting, crying the hardest, is the one who killed him.
The tragic murder of Melvin Combs in 1972 left a mark on his son. While Diddy claims to have turned his father's dark path into a legitimate empire, the whispers about the criminal foundations of his own rise to power suggest a complex legacy. The shadow of Melvin's underworld connections and the ultimate price he paid continues to cast a long and intriguing light on the narrative of Sean Diddy Combs, a haunting reminder that some legacies don't just echo, they embed themselves.